On January 12, 1964, Zanzibar, a nation of small islands located just east of the African mainland, experienced a violent revolution that overthrew the ruling monarchy and established a socialist republic. The revolution took place just over a month after December 10, 1963, when Britain ended its 73-year protectorate and granted Zanzibar full independence. The ethnically Arab monarchy had ruled pre-British Zanzibar for over 2 centuries since 1698 through a long line of dynastic succession. By the time of the revolution, the Zanzibari people shared a common religion, with 99% of the population being Muslim. However, there long simmered an undercurrent of tension between Africans, who comprised the majority on the one hand, versus the demographic minorities of ethnic Arabs and ethnic South Asians. Much of the African population comprised the lower social stratum of farm workers and laborers, while the upper class was dominated by Arabs who held political and economic power, as well as South Asians, who were mostly merchants and traders. This racial inequality had its origin to when Zanzibar, coming under Arab Omani rule, grew to become the center of the East Africa slave trade of Africans. In the 1890s, slavery had been abolished in Zanzibar, but Africans, despite being emancipated, mostly remained at the bottom societal stratum with meager social services, while Arabs and South Asians enjoyed the best public services such as education and healthcare. In the 1950s, when Britain was preparing Zanzibar for independence, Zanzibari political parties formed mainly along ethnic lines, the main parties being the Arab-led Zanzibar Nationalist Party and the African-led Afro-Shirazi Party. Then in parliamentary elections held in 1961 and 1963, the Arab ZNP won more seats over the African ASP, despite only winning a minority of the votes, leading to accusations of fraud that led to the outbreak of deadly street riots. However, it must be mentioned that after the revolution, the new Zanzibari government that was formed made no mention of race as contributing to the uprising, but that the regime was deposed because it did not represent the true wishes of the people. Another consideration was that the major political parties advocated socialism, with its members filling the spectrum from moderate socialists to hardline radicals, including those espousing communism through violent revolution. Another source of friction was the government's policy to draw diplomatically closer to Arab countries, which riled Zanzibari Africans who wished to be integrated with East African countries. The pre-independence elections generated political discord between the Arab ZNP and African ASP, which in turn exacerbated racial tensions. Tensions had long been rising, which had often threatened to erupt into open violence, but with both sides having the common desire to end British rule, ethnic strife was set aside for the more important goal of achieving independence. By the early 1960s, rumors were rife that once British rule ended, a revolution would be launched against the ruling monarchy, which were ignored by Zanzibari authorities. However, the rumors were not unfounded, as the Arab Ummah Party and radical elements of the Arab ZNP and African ASP were plotting their own uprisings against the monarchy. At independence, Zanzibar had no military forces and security was provided only by a small police force, which was even reduced by the recent dismissal of some 200 mainlander African police officers. In one account of the revolution, these dismissed police officers joined ranks with the ASP coup plotters and played a crucial role in the success of the revolution. At any rate, just hours before the revolution broke, Zanzibar authorities were tipped off that rebels would break into a police armory. The police increased vigilance, which however would prove inadequate against the revolution. Uncertainty and speculation surround who actually planned the revolution. A US CIA study in 1966 posits the following account. On the night of January 11, 1964, the dismissed African police officers, in attendance of an ASP feat, stirred the crowds to revolt on the rumor that the government was about to arrest ASP leaders. These ex-police officers launched the revolution, spontaneously and without prior planning, and with their familiarity with security procedures, broke into the armories and won over other African police personnel to their side. John Okello, until then an unknown member of the civilian revolutionary mob, displayed exceptional courage and combat skills during the initial outbreak of fighting that would quickly propel him to become the uprising's de facto leader and later the hero of the revolution. Another more popular account gives a different narrative, that it was John Okello himself who had planned and carried out the revolution. Apart from the ASP feat, many other celebratory events were simultaneously taking place in Zanzibar on the eve of the revolution, which gave cover for the rebels to start hostilities. Furthermore, whichever party actually masterminded the revolution, the following account of events is generally accepted. At about 3 a.m. on January 12, 1964, hundreds of revolutionaries, armed only with sharp weapons, attacked the Ziwani and Mitoni police stations outside the capital, Stone Town. Overwhelmed by their sheer number, the police officers there and broke into the armory, where they got hold of automatic rifles and submachine guns. Now armed with powerful weapons, the mob advanced to Stone Town, where they overcame more police stations. The rebels were soon joined by some 200 Umma Party militants who were armed with newly arrived Chinese weapons. By mid-morning, the revolutionaries had seized control of government buildings and public infrastructures. By then, the general population had joined as well, with armed civilians overwhelming the remaining loyalist forces. By early afternoon or just 9 hours later, the revolutionaries had gained full control of the city, having toppled the whole system using the element of surprise, and the government overthrown, thus also ending 200 years of Arab domination. In the midst of the rebel attacks, the Zanzibari government had appealed to Kenya and Tanganyika for military assistance, but failed to receive a timely response. Britain had also vacillated whether to aid the crumbling regime. During the revolution and following days, widespread violence and anarchy reigned, which were incited by the inflammatory religious speeches of Okello, now the de facto leader of the uprising, who appointed himself as field marshal and ordered the revolutionary mob to inflict as much brutality on the Arabs. As a result, his armed mobs descended on Arabs and South Asians, causing widespread violence, particularly in the countryside. Horrific scenes of the violence were captured in Africa Addio, a documentary by an Italian film crew that was working in Zanzibar at the time. Also in the period after the revolution, some 75% of the surviving Arabs, South Asians, and Comoros Islanders left Zanzibar, producing a drastic change in the country's demographic composition. On the day of the revolution, an interim government was formed, which renamed the country, abolished the Sultanate, barred the Sultan from returning, and outlawed Arab-aligned parties. Agrarian reform was implemented, and farmlands and businesses owned by Arabs and South Asians were seized and given to Africans. Virtually overnight, Arab and Indian domination of society vanished. In the immediate aftermath of the revolution, Okello, a non-Zanzibari, was extremely popular and held ultimate power. He had in fact announced the formation of the new government led by President Karume. Karume had promised no reprisals against the former regime and was shocked by the widespread violence, but was also powerless to rein in Okello's militia that was wreaking havoc in the countryside. To gradually counter Okello, an armed force from Tanganyika was brought in, and by early February 1964, Zanzibar was returning to normalcy. The government also moved to undermine Okello's popularity. Press coverage of him was banned, and his militia gradually suppressed. He was soon stripped of his self-appointed rank of Field Marshal, and on March 8, 1964, he was denied re-entry into Zanzibar on returning from a trip to Tanganyika. The revolution occurred at the height of the Cold War, and with Zanzibar forming a socialist government with the ouster of the West-aligned monarchy, the event took on a Cold War perspective. Communist countries, led by the Soviet Union and China, viewing the revolution as a class struggle, the triumph of working-class Africans over their landlord Arabs, promptly recognized the new government and provided military and economic assistance. Western countries, led by Britain and the United States, initially suspecting a communist hand in the revolution, were unsure how to react. But with the new Zanzibari government emphasizing African nationalism and the non-aligned Cold War stance, as well as remaining within the British Commonwealth, the West and other non-communist countries then recognized Zanzibar.